Hi, everyone. We are back, and we are here with our guest tonight, Brandon Barker. Brandon, I hope you had fun playing the Goose Game with us and getting to talk about how people anthropomorphize animals and some other great stuff. I think the chat was really loving you. But now, are you ready to get into your interview?
Yep, the game was a hoot.
A hoot! A game was a honk.
The honk. It was the honk of a good time.
And before we get started, Jared, because you're the co-host this week, do you want to do the honors?
Yeah, so I want to begin. So this is my first time playing in this role, so this is
Yeah.
exciting. So it's all good. So if I mess up, I blame somebody else, because I'm not taking blame. No. Then I want to say thank you to our wonderful sleuths. I'm finally seeing these. After looking at these documents, it really does. Uh, darn work you all put into this is quite extensive. So thank you all very much for all the hard work researching Brandon.
And it's
Uh,
not just me. It is a whole team of
yeah,
people.
it's a
Yeah.
whole team. It's not just Dom. It is a whole kit and caboodle of wonderful, beautiful people. So so there we go. So Dom, do you want to start off with anything, or do you want me to lead right into it?
I think that's good, Jared. Thanks for queuing me up, and I think I'll get right into these first questions. This is something that kind of came up during the gameplay, but I want to give you, Brandon, some a chance to really go deep on this one, go long on this one, as it were. And what can we learn about individual and collective worldviews by looking at the ways in which people anthropomorphize animals?
Okay, so I get the first thing. That's a really good question.
Thank you,
Uh,
sleuths.
Sleuths, yeah. Oh,
the
don't
first thing
worry,
that I would
Brandon. There's
say
more.
the first thing that I would say is, I am invested in the research program that is dedicated to understanding the human species. And probably every folklorist is going to say they're committed to that research program on some level. And in some ways, your question is geared towards that kind of thinking about the problem of what humans are. So the question kind of sounds like, what if I looked at all the ways that people anthropomorphize animals, created a big, huge empirical data set, and did across time and across culture studies of that empirical data set? What would I find? That's a really interesting question. I'll have to think really hard to come up with some good and compelling answers to it, but maybe I can. There are differences across cultures which are real and important. But the first thing I would say is that what you learn is that it is only we, our species, that has something like what we call a worldview. So
Hmm.
the first thing that you learn when you think about the way that humans anthropomorphize other animals is that our version of projecting ourselves on other animals is really, really special because it's tied up in all the other kind of reinterpreting that our minds do. If you agree with my buddy Danny, which I tend to agree with, there's this guy called Danny Pavanelli who's a chimpanzee expert, and he tends to disagree with a whole lot of animal cognition scientists who want to argue for the primary importance of mental continuity across species. This idea goes back to Darwin, and the idea is that all minds are linked in similarity because we all evolved from the same our evolutionary process.
Right.
And so Danny and I, following Danny, wouldn't say that that is untrue. All minds probably are connected in some really important ways. We just happen to think that the unique qualities of human minds, and by the way, these unique qualities, to be real short and quick about it, are those qualities that allow us to tell stories, create religions, manifest a worldview within a cultural system. Those are the things that are uniquely human. And those things are so powerful, they're so powerful that they're the most important part of understanding a human. They're the things that we're responsible for. Like whatever's going to happen to this planet that we've tortured for far too long is completely up to us because of those powers in our minds. And we don't know of any other
Mhm.
animal who has those kinds of powers. Whatever happens to a lot of animals that are on the verge of extinction, our minds can make decisions and understand the higher order relationships involved in order to change our behaviors in order to protect those animals. Take, for example, hunting laws for migratory fowl, coming back to the
Yeah.
goose. we're the only animal in the animal kingdom who's going to create laws that's going to govern our behavior to try and protect a species like migratory fowl.
Harvest them
Um,
too.
so I think that's the first lesson you learn, and maybe the most important, because it isn't like whenever we are arguing for human uniqueness, it is not an argument for human exceptionalism. It's not that at all. It's an argument for, look, we just got to be honest with ourselves about what we have up here, and we're responsible for what we have up here.
Hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah. Cool is
Yeah,
a good word for it.
I like that because like that idea of like that having taken a lot of like hard sciences classes myself, like that idea of like, oh, we're exceptional, or we see that, you hear that rhetoric all the time of like, well, we're the exceptional species on the planet. It's like, no, we're just unique. Like there's only like what, 5 great apes on the planet. Like we're unique even among that unique group, not
Sure.
exceptional.
Yeah.
You
There's
know,
Yeah.
other hominins around, and we weren't the only ones.
Right. Yeah, and there's other animals that can do other things. Danny has a colleague and a guy called Derek Penn. Definitely Penn, maybe first name Derek. Can't say it. And sorry, Derek. Who often says, the human mind sticks out in the animal kingdom like the prehensile elephant's trunk,
Mm.
or like
Hmm.
echolocation in the bat. I mean, there's things that like the bat does with echolocation that is wildly fascinating, interestingly unique. The prehensile trunk of the elephant is like, what? Where did that come from? How is there an animal who's able to do that? Our thing that sticks out in this irregular, compelling, unique way that's really important is this mind that is able to come up with computers and Twitch streams and
Yeah.
folklore, you name it.
Nice. That's Daisy is asking, how does power relate to that? Like animals may not have the quote unquote power to make laws to govern humans, while humans prevented the possibility of that in some ways. And then they say charismatic uniqueness? Question mark.
Hmm. All right, I want a little follow up, more on what we mean by charismatic
Yeah, it's a
uniqueness.
good turn
But
of phrase, but it can mean so many
yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah. That's super interesting.
I
But I
think
think,
they're knowing them. I think they're using it like charismatic megafauna, but of course, I'm thinking of it like charismatic Christianity.
yeah,
Right.
right. See,
Charismatic
that's where that's where
personality kind
mine
of thing,
goes
yeah.
to. Yeah. Um, how it relates to power is, I think, being honest with where power lies. It's almost like one of the, well, here's a turn of a phrase. Let's speak power, speak truth to our own power,
Mm.
and
Mm.
it isn't like, again, it's not a move of exceptionalism. It isn't that, oh well, we can control the future of the planet. It's that, oh man, it's us. We are. It's a blessing and a curse. We are the ones who might be able to help this planet get out of this situation, and it's largely going to be controlling our own behavior, which we're not very good at.
Mm. Mm.
No. Yeah.
I think
I
the
don't think that's a good answer, Daisy. I mean, the power question's a really good one. And that's where ethicists have to get involved.
yeah.
I don't think necessarily that folklorists are studying the answers to that kind of question. So I guess that's my weak way of excusing why I didn't have a good answer. But it's just really important I think it's really important for us to recognize how powerful this is, and
Yeah.
that we are the only ones who are powerful enough to stop this.
Mm.
Yeah. That's cool.
Brandon, did you ever
Yeah.
watch the TV show Community? Because I can tell you their answer to this question.
I didn't, but tell me about it.
Sharks are the only humans are the only animal with Shark Week. Sharks don't even celebrate Shark Week.
That's perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really well
Nice.
done.
Nice. I was curious then too, Brandon, as I'm looking at this question that we just asked about, collective world views, like what's something that surprised you most, like when you look at cultures, as far as like how cultures anthropomorphize different animals, like in unique ways, is like, oh, we revere this one versus we think, we give this one like trash panda, right?
Yeah.
Or like, is there something that's unique or very like opposite in a way, and what might that say about cultures? Like I'm thinking like with a lot of indigenous cultures in North America, looking at coyote,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
Like as trickster, but also giver of so many, like
Yeah.
helped shape after creator made the world in whatever various ways according to the myths, right? Maybe I'm asking this poorly, but I'm just like, what's something that surprised you across cultures and what that says about their values?
Well, okay. One thing that is consistent across cultures is that you guys still there?
Yep.
Yep, we're still here.
Sorry, I just did the old person thing. I was like, why does it sound different in my
I'm, I'm,
head?
I'm not a cat. I'm not a cat. I promise.
There is something inherent in that we have in the uniqueness of our minds that I'm talking about that allows us to establish an us. Here I'm talking at the
Mm.
levels of the species.
Mhm.
So somewhere about the time that you're 2 years old, you started to recognize yourself in the mirror. Sometime around when you were 4 or 5 years old, you started being able to talk about you as you, Jared, 2 weeks ago, as compared to what will be you, Jared, 3 months from now.
Wow.
Right.
And humans develop along similar lines across cultures, and we have since the advent of the species.
Right.
And so this understanding of us is definitely one of those blessings and curse things. I mean, the fact that we have a higher order understanding of time and us, like I have to know that I'm me, and I have to know that all those embarrassing things that I did in the past are still me, and I have to know that I'm going to get old and eventually we're all pointed in the same direction. It's like, ah, man, that's a drag. Why would I want to know all those things? There's something
Right.
in that that is deeply connected to also our experience of the other. So there's something
Mhm.
palpably human about me looking at you, Jared. I can't see your face, Tom, so I'm looking at you, Jared. And because Jared's so good looking, as we've said, and
Yes.
I'm looking at Jared, and
Most flatterful stream ever.
That's right.
there's something that I experience as a human in knowing about what your new job that you just got, and that you're here right now thinking about that game that we just played, and thinking about these
Right.
philosophical questions that we're asking that is unique to us. Okay, so this otherness gets projected onto our animals. We just do it. We
Mhm.
anthropomorphize our animals. And I think we do this in daily routines, and our species always has. It's just so easy, especially to treat our domestic animals in these human ways and behave with them in ways that we might behave with our own conspecifics. But also, clearly, we project this other onto supernatural entities like gods, ghosts. You see what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so that animals come together with this projected other in the supernatural space of, for example, coyote tricksters, as you just mentioned, is less surprising and more like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Of course, that slot is going to get filled in by an other that we all get to experience. I
Mm.
mean, in some ways, how uncanny is the dog who looks at us and looks at us just like our dog is a little bit
Hmm.
shy of the camera? We just don't get
Yeah.
to know whether or not that's actually true. It's just
Callback.
uncanny. It's so rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is you had some pretty higher level questions there, Brandon, but I think you aced them all. You're doing a great job, especially handling the ones from chat that are trying to throw curveballs at you. I think you're doing great, but I want to move on.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
move on to this next one,
Yeah.
which is related to all of your answers so far, which is that you have co-authored more publications than is typical in the humanities. What? Why would you say that you prioritize co-authoring so much?
So probably because that work has been so interdisciplinary,
Mm.
Right.
and so then for a couple of reasons, good interdisciplinary work requires a level of expertise across the disciplines. And so you need someone who is an expert in some of these other things. And so when I first started studying cognitive science, I was actually studying cognitive poetics. And Clay Rice, who's the guy that we wrote Folk Illusions together, which is a book about children's play with perceptual illusions. He was my entryway into cognitive science. So whenever I have a question about cognitive science or theories of active versus direct perception, I'm asking Clay anyway. So I know
Mm-hmm.
the folklore stuff, and I know the methods for getting out into, the Girl Scout troops and daycares, and how to organize and represent field work. But Clay knows all the other cognitive stuff really well. Not to mention he's an excellent linguist, which is important when you're
Mm-hmm.
working with young people. So for there was like a comprehensive set of skills and knowledge that came together. And with Danny, um, it's important to note that Danny almost never publishes by himself. So Danny Povinelli, who's this chimpanzee scientist, and he studied chimpanzees rigorously and experimentally for 3 decades. And scientists don't publish by themselves. They constantly
Yeah.
publish. And in some ways, some of the work we do is probably more honestly represented if we published together. For example,
Hmm.
if professors' names were tagged on their students' papers more frequently in the humanities, it might be a more honest representation of the work that's actually being done.
Mm.
But
Mm.
at the same time, there are still lone wolf projects that happen in the humanities that just don't happen in the sciences. And like right
Yeah.
now, I'm in the middle of a fieldwork project where I've been the one who was out there asking these questions about the Bell Witch for going on 7, 8 years now, and so I'll be the only one who can write about it in the way that I need to write about it.
Hmm.
Mm.
So humanists still do that, and so I guess I would come back to something that Pravina teaches, which is that field work for us in the humanities takes forever, right? I mean, like
Mhm.
I've written a little bit about the Bell Witch in the Folk Illusions book, but this book that I'm working on right now about the Bell Witch, I've been doing this field work for almost a decade. It takes a really long time to get all the data
Yeah.
we need, but also it's like dirt cheap. So scientists
Yeah.
have to work
Yeah.
really fast, and everything they do is crazy expensive. Our
Right.
stuff is dirt cheap, and it takes forever. They work really fast, and it's crazy expensive.
Huh.
We,
And
we don't
you
need
know,
we don't we don't need a gene processor or a CRISPR machine.
Or
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And they literally add on the cost of a CRISPR machine or a gene processor to like other grants. So for
Hmm.
us, the cost of one of those, I don't know, $300,000, who knows? It's just like a little add-on. Oh yeah, and we added that on to the cost of this other $10 million grant we were going after. But all that is to say that I think to ask the big, big questions about what it is to be human requires interdisciplinary work. And so that's why I've done most of that so far. Uh,
Cool.
yeah.
Brandon,
Yeah.
follow up from chat if I may. Is part of this the folkloristic uh attunement to our community over just data? I think tell me if I'm asking that right, chat.
I mean, I think it's a really good question. So if you feel like that's asked right, I'm happy to jump in
Yeah,
with
I
an
think so.
answer.
I think go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are things that we are attuning is a good word. Ourselves to when we're in the field for eight,
Mm.
9, 10 years. Um, that I clearly am not representing in some clean, higher order, mapped out, modeled relationship.
Yeah.
There's stuff that I've picked up on being in Adams, Tennessee that will show up in the book. There's little decisions I'll make, things that I know I have to say, things that I know I probably shouldn't say, that I'll
Right.
keep to
Yeah.
myself. And that's just
Yeah.
one example
Yeah.
that you kind of have to soak up. And boy, again, I come back to that verb. That's a good one. You have to become attuned to. So, like I'm talking about a witch, and really this next book is about belief.
Mm-hmm.
And you all won't be surprised. It's a book about cognitive science and belief. So there's a whole question about whether or
Of
not
course.
beliefs are real at all.
Yeah.
And this has been a robust discussion amongst philosophers and scientists of mind for the last, let's say, 50 years or so. But it's really interesting for a folklorist to go out into the world and ask those questions, especially whenever you're hunting a witch like the Bell Witch. So the Bell Witch is
Can
the
we say
most
her name on
famous witch.
stream? Is she
We can,
watching? Okay.
as long as we don't say it only 7 times. So if we make it to 7, if there's anyone counting, we should probably go past
I'm
7.
counting.
But she's the most famous witch in the Upland South, and a lot of people know about her. And so
Hmm.
you can go around Adams, Tennessee, where this legend is localized, and you can ask about the witch, and people are going to talk to you about the witch. And at
Mm.
first, you may come away with an idea that, yeah, they know all about the Bell Witch and Adams, and of course, they all believe in the Bell Witch, and she's just a witch that haunts them. And in some ways, that's true, but you
Mm.
understand how superficial that reading is
Mm.
after you're there for many years. Because actually, they have a really complicated relationship to the Bell Witch. And so the first lesson that you learn is they often put on that persona of the local Adams person who believes in the Bell Witch, who
Ah,
are out
yeah.
of towners like myself who come in asking about the Bell Witch. Oh yeah, we're
Mm.
scared to death of the Bell Witch. You should be too. Yeah, yeah, you really should.
That was something I experienced when I visited you in Adams too. The kind of there were what appeared as true believers, and there were also people who were doing this because they knew I was watching. Yeah.
Like a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And so I've been there long enough that I could watch Tim and Dewey behave just slightly differently because you were
Hmm.
there for the first time than they
Exactly.
would behave around me. And I
Exactly.
think that comes back to the good question from chat. Those are the things we pick up on.
And Brandon, good answer
Mhm.
too, because it's one of those questions that made the question, and one of the answers that made the question make more sense as you went along. Yeah. So, chat, Brandon, everyone, great job tonight. You're very attuned, I would say.
Nice,
Oh,
nice,
And I just want to
nice
point
job.
out you've said her name 6 times, so you're safe. I don't know if you were counting.
ooh,
I
okay.
think I think I
Thank
think
you.
we did 6. I can watch this when I'm editing this for YouTube
You have to
and see
say
if we're
it.
cursed.
You have to say it. If you say it 7 times, you have to say it more than that.
If you say it 7 times, she heard you, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, can I go into it?
Go into it. Go into it. Go
There we
into
go.
it.
This is it below my. Please share with my Minnesota now Oregon Coast mind. I don't know what
All
this
right.
one is.
Yes.
I can tie some of this into. So we've all heard probably of the children's folklorists call them mirror summonings,
Hmm.
like Bloody
Mm,
Mary.
yeah.
Like people who are interested in folklore are gonna have heard about the Bloody Mary trick.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that you get in front of this mirror. It's almost always a bathroom mirror, and you say the supernatural entity's name, or you say you hate the supernatural entity, or you say you don't believe in the supernatural entity. So many times, and the ritual is completed, and the entity comes and gets you.
Hmm.
So just like all of these mirror summoning traditions, it varies on who you ask, whether or not you need to say BW 7 times, 13
Nice.
times, 36 times. It just varies. Depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
But probably the most widely recognized number is 7. And so they do a play in Adams, Tennessee every fall. It's written by this really interesting playwright and actor. The guy's name is David Alford, who's actually from Adams. He was on that show Nashville. He played Bucky Dawes. Anybody who watched
Oh,
Nashville,
no
he was
way.
Bucky Dawes. Yeah, so that's David Alford, and David has a part in the play where at the end of the play they talk about this children's activity. And basically, it's the play is kind of spooky. They put it on
Mm,
during Halloween. He's playing up the spooky stuff,
Hmm.
and they all hold up a candle. They talk about how, and some people say that if you go into the bathroom with a candle and say, "I hate BW" or "I don't believe in BW" 7 times, that she'll come into the mirror and get you. And then what all the actors do, they're not on stage anymore. The whole cast is kind of spread out to the audience, and they whisper it. So you just hear them saying like, "I hate the Bell Witch, I 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 hate the Bell Witch." And what they commit themselves to doing is either saying less than 7 of those whispers or more than
mm,
7 of those whispers.
Yeah.
So that's a
nice.
very specific reading of the ritual that comes from the cast of that play. The play is called
Mm,
Spirit. And if you're around Middle Tennessee, it's worth a trip in
I would love
September
to
and
do that.
October.
That's right.
That'd be super fun.
Fun.
Daisy wants to say said when are Brandon and I going to talk about mirrors and consciousness? Consciousness peering at the self window through those are all
You're
capitals.
you're you're doing you're doing perfect, Jared.
The mirror. Well, I don't know if Brandon can see, so he's like, "What's going on with
You
Jared?
can see it.
That diet Sprite's really getting
Okay,
to
now
him.
they're saying don't read that.
It's embarrassing."
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot to unpack there with the mirror and the eye and seeing and knowing. But
We did, Daisy. We did talk a little bit about mirrors and consciousness with animals or self
that is
awareness
true. The
with
mirror
animals
self
earlier. So
recognition. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Brandon, I'm
and then
gonna pivot away from some of these topics and get to something else you're quite familiar
yes,
with. Yeah,
another
and
one.
Brandon, how has the embodied interaction of pedal steel guitar players with their instruments evolved out of several mechanical additions to slide guitars of the Hawaiian tradition?
Oh, that's great.
Thank you, sleuths.
That is great. Yeah, so the first thing that I was interested in whenever I was thinking about this cognitive stuff was this musical instrument called the pedal steel guitar. So if you think that you're getting me away of the cognitive folkloristic approach, it isn't true.
Nope.
Um, so I myself am like a lot of good uh, folklorists in that I have picked up a six string before and I can strum the cowboy chords and play some country music songs and sing along poorly. But what I can't do is play any complex music on that instrument. So I've always been fascinated, with things like a B. A B blows my mind, or an F. What is that? How do you even make that shape? And as a country music fan, I knew about the pedal steel guitar. And what I know about the pedal steel guitar, and by the way, this is an instrument that's played with both hands, both knees, and both feet at the same time. There's one foot that's working as a volume pedal. There's another foot that's working, let's say, 6 to maybe 10 to 12 pedals on the floor. And both knees are working knee levers that go left and right and up and down. And then there's a bar in one hand and there's picks, kind of like you would see
What?
on the other hand.
Just I just
Okay.
I just Googled this thing. What in the
Yeah.
world is going
Wow. If
Yeah.
you
on?
had to Google
Right.
that, Jared, you are really an upper Midwesterner, huh?
Oh yeah, there, bud. Yeah.
there,
Oofta.
there's
I mean, I know what a
typically more
steel
than
guitar is, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
there's typically more than 2,500 parts in one of these instruments. So there's just
Wow.
it's a mind blowing instrument. Okay, here's what happens. Here's what the story is, and this is to save some time. I'm going to mix in some legend and some things that we know pretty well as facts. Sometime in the 1880s, probably, uh, someone picked up either a penknife or another variant of this legend is a railroad spike
Yeah.
and ran it along the strings of their steel string guitar that was being played in the Spanish position. So we talk about a Spanish position, and this is how I play my bad cowboy chords and don't play, F's or B's. And 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 then we talk about the Hawaiian position, and this is where the sound hole is facing up. And so this sliding behavior on the fretless banjo, for example, was happening all throughout the American South in the 19th century, and well, in a lot of places in the American South in the 19th century. And a lot of people associate bottleneck slide guitar with the blues. So there's a little bit of a mystery about whether or not the bottleneck stuff happened before the Hawaiians brought it to the mainland. But there are historians who've done some pretty rigorous documentary historical documenting the historical paperwork, we might say.
Yeah.
A guy called John Troutman wrote a good book about this, who says that it was basically the Hawaiians. Either way, it wasn't the white folk who we usually think of playing country music. But what happens is in 1880s, there's a guy called Joseph Kukuku who gets associated with this legend of picking up the railroad spike one day and running across the strings. And we probably all know that glissando, that we recognize from country music. And so it happened that way. And people fell in love with that sound, with the glissando. There's something in that whiny glissando of the steel guitar that really fits well with country music. Speeding forward a couple of few decades, some things happen. In the first, let's call it 3 decades of the 20th century, Hawaiian music gets really popular on the American mainland. This is due to probably some of the initial tourist companies making their way out into the Pacific Ocean. It's due to Hawaiian traditions making their way into places like New Orleans, which is, if the Hawaiian slide became the blue slide, it came up through New Orleans almost certainly. Maybe New York, but almost certainly New Orleans. And so Hawaiian music gets popular. There's a really popular musical called Bird of Paradise that is first staged, I want to say, in like 1908 and has like a 20-year run. Really well-known musical. And help me if I'm wrong on that date. It's and okay, and then the slide guitar gets electrified. So the first electric guitars, when we think about the history of the electrified guitar, and we all think of like, shredding metalheads, it goes back to a Hawaiian guitar that was electrified. It was this thing called the frying pan, and it was done by a company called Rickenbacker. And so the reason why they got electrified is because when you turned the sound hole up, they couldn't get enough volume out of the slide guitar to play for the kind of two-step country dance halls that they were wanting to play for. Not to mention, once you do electrify it, the slide guitar sounds even more awesome. So like, there's early Western swing jazzy stuff that has this like mind-blowing, electrified Rickenbacker guitar on it. Milton Brown and the Brownies is a good place to start looking if you want some of that music. Okay, so once we get that, what we have is a sound quality that people love. It's fit well into the genre of country music, and so we're after that. It's all working. We can make it loud enough now because we've electrified it and we're amplifying the volume. The problem is it's a restricted instrument. It's like me playing the sixth string this way. It's just one bar and picks on this side. So you can't create any. You can sort of turn the bar and create some slants, but you can't create any complex chord positions. So what they do is they start dropping hangers and you name it off of the strings of the guitar and using their feet and knees to bend strings. So they come up with some mechanisms to loosen the string and tighten the string, which is the same thing that you would be doing if you were playing with your fingers, some of the same things. And so they can create even more complex chord positions than what we can typically create with just our fingers on one hand. And that's how that instrument happened.
That's amazing. I've learned all of that just now. I was
Yeah.
6 years old today. It's amazing.
Also, I don't. Oh, go for it, Brandon.
Well, I was just going to say there's this one interlude that's worth mentioning.
Do it.
Barbara Mandrell had one of these guitars. So the first thing they did was not to create different, not ways to create different chord positions. It was just creating more necks. So you could have a different tuning.
Yeah.
So they would have like a slide guitar with like 5 necks up it. So you can imagine playing this tough slide up here. And I'm trying to think if I've ever actually seen it or have only ever heard about this like as a kind of legend, which is that they had one that was basically a cube and there was a neck on each side and you would turn to the neck that you wanted to play at any given point of a show.
Wow. That's amazing.
I was gonna say, Brandon, Memorial Day weekend, come to Tallahassee, the Florida Folk Festival, home of the Sacred Steel Summit.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have one of the most important steel traditions down there. Now, it's not clear to me what percentage of sacred steel players are playing pedal as compared to just lap steel. I always thought that it was a lot more lap steel.
I think it is. I think it is actually.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple I've seen who do pedal, but I think most of them, especially like, I don't know, the ones who tour a lot, are lap steel. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you can see how the same thing that, when country's leaning into its whiniest, let's talk about our emotions version of itself, you can see how that glissando is. There's
right. Yeah.
in the glass.
Yeah.
You can
Nice.
see how that would do well in a church service too.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. That's great. Dom, you ready for me to ask the next question?
Oh, you ask the next question?
Is Brandon ready? Yeah.
Oh yeah,
is Brandon ready?
absolutely. And this came up a little bit already, but you have more time to do this here. How has your work on children's folklore changed your experience or perspective as a father,
Vice versa.
or vice versa?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So let's say that in American folkloristics since the middle of the 20th century, ethnography has been the prized methodology.
Yeah, the ethnographic turn. Yeah.
If we wanted to argue over that, we could. But let's just say that.
Okay.
Whether however we want to complicate that history, I do think that ethnography is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of the good work that we've done to reconsider our own positionality as folklorists in the context of ethnography, all the good work that we've done rethinking representation from top to bottom and how do we approach representation ethically is hugely important. I think almost all of those lessons fall apart when we're dealing with kids, especially kids around the age of, let's say, 4, 5, 6 years old, which is really an important age when kids start performing their own folklore for each other. It happens younger, but it's just a good age for folklorists to go in and offer up something like the rubber pencil and see if they get the detachable thumb, 5, 6 years old. But all of the old tricks that we know from ethnography don't work with kids. I'll give you like a primary example.
Nice.
So here's one thing that you know whenever you're an ethnographer. So I've been working with this guy who's a storyteller, Tim Henson in Adams, Tennessee. He's become a dear friend of mine. And speaking of kids, like he loves my kids and they get along. They send little cute pictures back and forth. Tim will send them, rocks he's picked up for him from Adams,
Aw,
Tennessee,
that's
and
cute.
created this relationship. That's one of the great things about being a folklorist. But Tim can tell me something, right? So Brandon, um, uh, the Bell Witch is represented in literature, most importantly in M.V. Ingram's 1890s book about the Bell Witch. And he can tell me that, and I can go back to Tim the next day, the next week, or a month later, and I can ask him about M.V. Ingram, and Tim will know what I'm talking about, and will still have the same kind of attitude about M.V. Ingram. Well, I've been thinking a lot about Charles Bailey Bell recently, Brandon, but I still think M.V. Ingram is really important. And here I'm not just talking about sophistication of being able to put sentences together. I'm talking about you can go ask a kid. You could show them the rubber pencil, and they could show you the detachable thumb, a kid 5, 6 years old. And you could go back 2 weeks later and say, hey, I was going to get you to tell me about this detachable finger trick that you showed me. And the kid will look at you and say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I've never shown you this detachable thumb thing. You're weird for asking me about it. You're making up stuff. I think you need to go see somebody. That's
Right.
what you kind of feel like.
Yeah.
And so I guess for me, it ties a little bit into some of these questions that we're asking when we think about how hard is it to figure out what's actually going on in an animal's mind. I'm not saying that kids are the same thing as non-human animals. I'm saying that the folklorists, the skills that we have, work
Mm.
about as good for a kid as they do for animals. As the kids get older, our tricks get better. Teenagers, 8, 9, 10, around
Right.
there, our tricks get better. But young kids, whoo, I call it doing field work with an alien mind.
Mm. Do you find yourself like doing ethnography like at home with your kids?
Oh yeah.
I don't think
Do
you can
they know
turn it off.
and do they know that like dad's studying me right now? Or are they still too young for that?
What they
Probably.
get good at, and here's my projection. And I don't know if this is really happening, but what they get good at is they can kind of tell whenever I'm like following up, on a line of questioning. They recognize a line of questioning. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, are you doing the thing? Are you doing the thing where you're
You're doing
studying
the
me?"
thing. Nice.
And they just
Nice.
shut it
Really
down.
good.
That's awesome. Are you doing
Good
the
on them.
thing?
Good on them.
That's great.
Well,
But
Brandon,
now,
Nice.
we've got some fun questions for you. Do you want to move into the fun question part of the interview?
yeah, because those are hard.
Yeah, here's some easy ones. I'll go right to this one because you already brought it up a little bit. Is there a favorite folk illusion of yours that you could perform on camera to the folks at home right now?
Well, the one that I once got made fun of in class for, like, because I use this example a lot. There's all kinds of philosophical ideas that I lean into, folkloric ideas I lean into with a rubber pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
like one of my students once in a children's folklore class made fun of me for how many times I performed the rubber pencil for them.
Nice.
So I don't know if it's my favorite, but evidently it's one that I overperform. I use too frequently.
It's
One
funny.
that I can do. Yeah, if you haven't ever, so can I do? Let me just do something real quick. If you haven't ever done this one and you're watching, you can do this right now, and it's really an interesting one.
Let's
And
go.
it's the one that we open folk illusions with, and we learned this one from a kid named Zane, and that's why we call it Zane's illusion. And
Mm.
the illusion works like this. Okay, so first off, you all know that we have two eyes, which means we have binocular vision.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that not everybody sees the same way. There's a lot of complexities going on with binocular vision. For example, you can see really well and only be seeing out of one eye. But I am
Mm.
talking about a kind of prototypical physiological situation in which you're looking at two eyes. And one thing that we know just by looking at the space between our two eyes is that there's a lot of work being done in this head that's creating a single image. We're rarely aware of the fact that we experience our visual array by a binocular vision. But kids seem to pick up on something like this when they pull off little tricks like this. So one that you all know is this one, and this is the floating finger trick.
Yep.
And you kind of look past your fingers, not focus on them, and you'll see a little. Something's called the floating sausage trick. I like that name.
That's how I
You
heard
kind of
it.
see a
Yeah.
little floating sausage there.
Right
So that's
now.
the one that I knew whenever I first started doing the research. And then this kid showed me this, Zane's illusion. What happens is you take your arm, put it out in front of you, and then I like to make a fist for some reason. I don't know if that helps or doesn't help. And you want to put your forearm so that it's in between your two eyes. And then take your finger and sort of run it, point it perpendicular to the wall that's on your right. And slowly run that finger past your arm.
Very good.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's silly. That's so
Yeah, isn't that
good.
crazy?
Chat, I
So
hope
you've
you're
got
doing
this-
this. I hope you're doing this, chat.
We're all making
We-
a fool of ourselves here. This is great.
This weird foreshortened finger. You know what
Oh,
I mean?
that's so funny.
Yeah. And
So-
So weird.
sorry, go.
I like that one because it's straight up from a kid, and I don't know that scientists have ever studied it at all. Scientists have worked with a lot of the folk illusions we've studied, like floating arms when you press your arm the inside of the door frame. Scientists have actually studied that a lot
The,
and
the,
for a long
con- the
time.
constant effect, right?
The constant illusion, that's
Yeah.
right, for over 100 years, because they're trying to figure out basically what causes kinesthetic movement. Is it always conscious control? Whenever it's unconscious control, what are the processes involved whenever our arms literally float up by themselves? But the scientists are kind of hip to that one, and the kids still play that all over the world. But this one, the scientists haven't studied yet, and
Yeah.
the kids, know it, and it's pretty neat. What's really good is I teach this class of 300 freshmen, an intro to folklore class, and so you get all 300 of the students doing it at once. So they're all doing it, and you can hear them going, "Oh, what? Whoa!"
Just like we did.
So
And I
good,
hope
yeah.
everyone at home did too. I know Brandon.
So fascinating.
I know Brandon, you can't see it, but Jared has Twitch up so he can see it. I happened to find in my office the other day. This is a coat hanger with with yarn tied around it. I still have this one. This will not play. It has to be your own ears. This will not play on Twitch at all. But I still have my coat hanger illusion ready to go. If anyone comes down to Florida, I will show you the coat hanger illusion.
Oh man, the coat hanger illusion, the church bell illusion. That
Church
one's
bell.
great.
Yep.
Yes, that one will blow your mind.
Brandon, next fun one. What is the cultural marker that denotes if you are or aren't in the South?
Yes, please tell a Yankee like me. What is it?
Okay. So I think the second person plural is probably the most prominent. And so, it wouldn't be anything radical to lean into language on this question, but probably it's going to be y'all.
Y'all. Okay.
Y'all.
Oh.
Now there's some important inflections of y'all that are going to tell you about where you are in the South.
That's right.
For example, the further you go in the American South, the more likely you are to hear the second person plural possessive used without the S marker. So y'all, if I'm asking if you've got a boat that's y'all's over there in Tennessee, I might say something like, is that y'all's boat? But if I'm asking that same question in the deep South, let's say south of I-10 in Lafayette, Louisiana, I might say, no, I'm not might say, I likely will say, is that y'all boat?
Yeah.
So is that y'all boat is really good
Interesting.
for regional differentiation. And whether or not you say Coke for all of the different soda products.
Oh,
is a
yeah.
good lexical
Yeah.
example.
Right.
And then there was one really specific one in Tennessee that I always ask my students of 300 because it's kind of disappeared because the company closed, I want to say 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer now. I notice as I get older, I underestimate how long ago something happened. Maybe it was 30 years ago. But we call cinder blocks, the things that are used in construction.
Yeah, cinder blocks. Yeah.
I was like 30 years old and before I knew that they weren't all called Bricko blocks. Because there was a
Wait.
company
Bricko
in Middle Tennessee that was called Bricko Block. And so the vernacular name for that Or cinder block was Brico block.
You were a
So,
taxpayer before you heard the term cinder block.
but yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So there was a time whenever I could ask students if anybody had heard of a Brico block, and they raise your hand, and I
Mm.
could tell that they were from Middle Tennessee.
Interesting.
That's precisely how those kind of quizzes that we take
Yeah.
online that ask us what we call this or that, and then tell us where we're from.
Duck, duck, gray duck, Jared.
Duck, gray duck.
Yep. The
Well,
sleuths who wrote that assumed you were gonna go with T.
Well, yeah, that's a good one too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if I didn't go language, I would lean in on food,
Mhm.
and I think tea's one of them. So when you order tea and you expect for it to be iced and sweet, whenever you can no longer expect that, that's safe to say that you're out of the South.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you get brought something unsweet, or if you get brought something, and now the chains is hard to, because there's chains that are in different
Sure.
places. But mom and pop shop, when you get brought unsweet, or especially if you get brought
Hot tea.
I'm curious.
Go for it,
So,
Jared.
But I would say the same thing for barbecue. There's all kinds of barbecues that
Oh, yeah.
don't necessarily involve a long smoke process,
Mm-hmm.
or at least an indirect smoked process.
Mm-hmm.
Like getting invited to a barbecue could be like getting invited to
A cookout.
hot dogs on the grill.
Yeah.
I love hot dogs on the grill. I just wouldn't call it a barbecue.
I was gonna say it's interesting that we bring up y'all, which I expect with a discussion of like, hey, you're from the South or not, because like I mentioned, like I'm from Minnesota, and here I am today. I was out in the field in Oregon, and I said to these older archaeologists, I was like, "Well, y'all," I was like, "Well, it's nice to see you. It's nice to see y'all," and I'm like, what does that make you feel when here's me like from the tundra of America using
Yeah.
y'all in this like weird way? Because I think it's a great word. I think it's super fun. It's effective.
Sure.
It's inclusive. But like, I don't know, what do you feel when someone like me uses it?
I know I've told you this, Jared. I know I've told you this, Jared. I don't know if Brandon knows this, but the Trillbillies podcast, they're from Whitesburg, Kentucky. One of them is dating a folklorist we know, but they have a term for a highly educated Northerner who starts using y'all in their 20s and 30s to be more inclusive, and that's called a y'all star.
Nice, nice. I also think it's fun. It's just a fun thing to say.
I guess it would be like you kind of see through it, like there's a lot of we need all the diphthongs in our y'alls in the South. Y'all. I mean,
Y'all.
you gotta be able to chew on it. And at the same time I'll be able to pick up on monothongization. Like my God love her, my sister Shaylin, speaks like a true, like right from the heart of Tennessee. Like the word light, that's a diphthong for most of the
Light,
country.
yeah.
Light, it's a diphthong. Light, white, right, are y'all all right? And so like there's other things that have to get coupled with the y'all for it to be the genuine y'all.
Right.
not
Yeah.
to-
And
Well, I was gonna say
I'm
not
not-
to make fun of your accent, Brandon, but I don't know the name of the man you referenced earlier. If it was Penn or Pin, the last name of this person who worked with Danny. I think
Derek
you
Penn?
said. I think you said Penn, but you
Derek
might be
Penn.
saying Pin.
Well, his name is spelled Penn.
I thought it was gonna be Pin at first. Then I'm like, oh wait, Brandon's accent. Hold on.
yeah, because I don't use a southern. I don't try to imply a southern accent whenever I say y'all. But it was just interesting because then the guys gave me this look like, did he just say y'all?
It's a good word.
What?
English second person.
Yeah,
not
it's-
enough. There's not enough. Yeah.
It's fun. I like using it.
Sticking with this theme of the South, Brandon. Describe your ideal cowboy boot. What are like your parameters for boot buying?
Ooh.
Well, they've kind of changed, because I was really into like hard leather heels and I wanted a really pointy toe, but I've gotten older. So I wear a lot of rubber soled, like comfort Ariat type boots.
There we go.
Whenever I was younger, like nothing but like, hard heeled, the pointiest toe I could get my hands on, like Casey's or something. But now, just like what's the most comfortable? My poor knees.
Are you not?
But I will say
right now, are
that
you?
where I grew up, no, I'm not right now because it's, I'm just not because it's cold. Let me get warm. Like I was always into the a little boots that were a little bit more dandy.
Hmm.
So I liked being from the South, and I grew up in a really rural place. I grew up in a town of White House, which when I grew up there was about 1,500 people. But I actually grew up in a kind of village next to White House, Cotton Town, which is like about 300 people or less. But I didn't live on a farm. I lived in this weird tiny subdivision tucked away in all of the agricultural spaces. So, but most of my friends, grew up on a farm. So they all wore the pointed boots with the flat toe.
Right.
Not rounded toe.
Hmm.
Very few of
Yeah.
us wore the rounded toe, but pointed boots with the flat toe, and I just wore the pointed toe, and I suffered some social discomfort. I got picked on a little bit for wearing
Mm.
Andy boots, but I couldn't help it. They just look so beautiful.
It's cool.
Chad is
Now I feel
respecting
like
your
I'm telling
dedication.
too much about myself.
No, chat loves it. They're
Oh, that's
saying
great.
chat is saying you would die for fashion, and actually, people love the rounded toe. People in chat are loving the rounded toe. I think it's some horse girls who
Yeah.
love the rounded toe in chat, though.
Okay.
I miss wearing cowboy boots. I used to rock cowboy boots all the time when I lived in Montana, and I miss it.
Oh, you lived in Montana, though. Yeah, that's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um.
So what I'm wearing right now, or a couple times in a row, are the
Mhm.
like mid-level Ariats that are the quarter height. Not the full
Mhm.
calf boot, but the quarter height.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a slightly pointy toe, not as pointy as my younger days, but they're also
That's your
rubber
dandy
soles.
days.
It's my dandier days.
Last fun question before we close out with your fun activity, but it is we've said this before on the show. I believe it's Carrie Kaliva's episode that every folklorist is theater kid adjacent. What did you learn about yourself as you wrote and produced a play?
Whew. Okay. It's pretty interesting. So I wrote and produced that play with Danny Povinelli, who there is no one, there is no scholar outside of the great folklorists who I've been around and worked with who's affected me more as an intellectual than Danny.
Oh,
I think about the world differently because I know Danny. And that play was based upon. So I have to tell you a little bit something about that play if I can get another long-winded answer. Um, so I'm worried I'm being boring, but
you
here
are
we
not
go.
being boring.
Far,
I'll
far
try to give
from
the
it. Far from it.
non-boring
No,
answer.
this is I
That
think
play was about.
This is
fascinating.
Danny was infatuated with chimpanzees since he was a very young person.
Hmm.
So like we went and did I did my ethnographer's research. Man, I interviewed Danny about his life as a child growing up, how early he was interested in chimps, his infatuation with Jane Goodall, his infatuation with chimps who were locked up at the zoo, little songs that he and his sister wrote, all these drawings he did trying to capture the face of the chimpanzee in pencil sketch. And he also, as a very young age, was on the debate team. Things that like make sense if you know Danny. He's
Hmm.
really smart. It's going to be pretty hard to win an argument against Danny, especially if it's on some sort of complicated intellectual topic. And he really is interested in this phenomenon of the chimpanzee. So like all that plays perfectly. But what you don't know until you get behind the curtain of this story is that Danny first came into this study of chimpanzees with the idea that what he was going to do is truly find a kindred other out in the world. So
Mm.
what he was going to learn about chimpanzees is that at their core, at their essence, there was going to be something that he recognized as just like him. And so that infatuation was going to become a kind of kindred relationship.
Yeah.
Now, what if you were a rigorous, really, really good, methodologically driven scientist, and what you found out when you ran couple decades worth of experiments on chimpanzees is wow, they're really interesting, they're really smart, they're really beautiful, and you love them for what they are, but they just ain't us. And how tragic that really is. And in some ways, it became a kind of stand in for, well, I guess I might say the loneliness of the
Mm.
unique aspects of the human mind that I talked about earlier.
Hmm.
Mhm.
One of the utter tragedies of our existence is that, as far as we know, someone like Danny who's going to hold a scientific worldview. We're the only species who experiences all this, and that can be pretty lonely. So I guess what I realized whenever I wrote a play is that I do sometimes fret over the existential train wreck. Not always, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I really wanted to be an artist, it would be hard for me to want to work on anything other than the existential train wreck. And that's depressing and sad, but that's the real answer to that question.
Mm. That's incredible answer. Well, one last thing we want to do with you, Brandon. Thank you for staying with us here. But
Yeah, absolutely.
one last thing we want to do with you, a thing we normally don't let a guest such as yourself do, or come on the show without doing. We got a question for you, and that is: have you ever made a tier list?
uh, I don't think so.
Oh, you don't think
I
so?
mean, maybe, but maybe I don't know what you're asking about.
It's a painless process, I promise.
Yes, true. So if you haven't already clicked watch stream, please click watch stream, and you will have a
Okay.
tier list that we made for you
Uh-huh.
ready on the screen. Now, tier lists come from fighting games. They are a way to rank character choice with a multitude of character options. But recently
Uh-huh.
on Twitch, they've become a way to organize things in everyday life. So, of course, folklorists love them, and we love to make a guest do their own tier list. This tier list that we have made for you is Aesop's best animal fables, and we want you to rank the Aesop animal fables, get real into animals and folklore and cognition. And tier lists in the Japanese parlance go from S to D, S being a score above 100, A, B, C. D is barely passing. We have precedent to make an F if you really hate one, and like a double or triple S or S plus if you love something more than above 100. So I'm going to go through these Aesop's fables that we have selected. I will contextualize what each of these images are, and you are going to rank them, whatever criteria you feel, how it speaks to you on a scale from S to D. Are you ready?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's start off right
This is
here.
fun.
This is the tortoise and the hare. Where do you rank the tortoise and the hare?
Okay, all right. So give me just a second. I'm gonna try to come up with a system on it, on
Go
how
for it.
I'm
Go for
ranking
it.
these in my head. Am I ranking them against one another? Am I ranking them for my knee-jerk reaction? Am I ranking them for folklore, generally speaking? Um,
Yes. Love it.
let's see.
I love
Okay,
them. I
okay,
love all those
okay,
options.
They're all great,
okay.
yes.
Yeah. Um, okay. Yeah, I got it. I think the tortoise and the hare is got to be okay. Here's the other problem that I'm going to admit before I start ranking, because I'm just looking at the different ones and I can
Yeah,
kind of tell what stories they are, and I feel a lot of A's and B's and S's. I think I just am a big fan of the fables,
go
but
for it.
I gotta give this one an S. I mean,
Yeah, we love an
Yeah.
immediate straight to S answer, don't we? Don't we, chat?
yeah. Have you
Yes.
all ever seen the Simpsons bit where Marge is in the go-karts and she's like going super slow and she's like got her Marge voice and she goes slow and steady wins the race, but all the kids are like clearly zooming around her and lapping her. Okay, that's just a gesture towards the intertextual possibilities that the
Mm.
tortoise and the hare offers up.
Wow.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
Wow,
so
is
perfectly.
Catherine Young on here? Are we gesturing towards intertextuality?
That was just got to be. I mean, it's a classic.
That's
Everyone
right.
knows it.
Yeah. Everyone knows it, yeah.
And
Uh,
once someone actually showed me a video of a tortoise actually beating. I don't know if it was a rabbit or a
oh yeah, it
goat.
was like on like a Chinese variety show or something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Brandon, I want you to know, chat. Someone in chat said the thought process reveal has been incredible. So I think they like you working through it as much as they like what your result
Right.
is going to be. The next one is the frog and the scorpion.
Okay, the frog and the scorpion. Now this one's kind of interesting because this doesn't always get canonized, right? This is one where
Mm.
the frog rides on the scorpion and the
Yeah.
scorpion stings the frog and they both die.
Yeah.
Yep.
No. The scorpion's riding on the frog and they both die. And
Yep.
then it's got this like twist, which is it's in my nature, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So why did you sting me? You killed us both because how could I do otherwise?
Oh, fake
Well, I mean,
friends.
you could sort of like take a step back and look around at some of the things that we've been talking about with what's up here. So another saying, and here I'm just going to quote my old pal Danny, and this is to make it real one last time because that's what fables are supposed to do. They're rhetorical tools,
Yeah.
Is Danny says, here's the thing about science, and here's the thing about technology. As far as I can tell, I'm no historian, Danny says. Humans basically are going to put whatever they create to use for the greatest possible good and to use for the greatest possible evil. Now, we don't have to use the words good and evil if that sounds too, I don't know, religious or something. We could just say the greatest possible positive and the greatest possible negative, but you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Think the difference between, you know, all of the medicine we now have to protect. These things are on my mind, expecting women and the babies inside of them, and
Mm-hmm.
all the tools that we now have, and then connect some of those same technologies to, for example, sonar technologies that are used in war.
Right.
The same ideas are coming from the
Mm.
same mind, and we're going to do both of those things with it. So, is
Damn.
that our nature? Is that our nature? Is that what we are? And
Mm.
anything that we might create, no matter how great it is. I mean, the thing that's happening right now that all these educators are worried about is AI technology and the Chat
Yeah.
GPT thing. It's super cool, isn't it? Have y'all played around on that thing? You're young people. You have. It's so amazing. But at the same time, are we thinking about what all the possible negatives are? And whew, I can dream up some pretty terrible negatives. So is our thing going to be that we're just the scorpion and we can't help it? We're going to create, and then the positive and the negative is going to come out of it, or are we going to listen to the fable? And so I'm giving it an S.
Wow. Now, is it
Ooh.
is it an S above the tortoise
Nice.
in the hair or an S below
That's
the
my
tortoise in the hair?
that's my question too. Yeah.
First place or second place?
I'm going to put the tortoise in the hair up there so I can. That's me being an optimist.
All right. That's good. That's good.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Next is the goose that laid the golden egg.
Again, the
Okay.
goose.
Yeah, yeah. This was just about greedy people, basically, or impatient and greedy people.
Yeah.
So this goose is laying a golden egg every day, and they imagine that there's a big piece of magic golden nugget inside of the goose, so they kill the goose to get at it. But then, of course, there's nothing special inside that goose. It turns out it's like every other goose, and they no longer are getting their one golden egg per the day. So that one makes me kind of sad and probably reminds me of some of my own financial decisions over the years. Like going back to crushing my first piggy bank, to speaking of animals in human society. I'm going to give that one. I mean, it's an important lesson, but I think it's probably a B.
Okay.
'Cause I do feel like after I
Yeah.
crushed the piggy bank and spent all my money on a senior trip when I graduated high school, I learned those lessons quickly enough not to do them
Been
again.
there. Next is the fox and the hedgehog.
Okay, the Fox and the Hedgehog. How does that narrative go?
The fox knows lots of things, and the hedgehog knows one thing very well, and I can't remember what happens afterward, but the
Yeah.
hedgehog wins because he's an expert at one thing.
Okay, this is another one of those that is this like in the Aesopian canon, the Fox and the Hedgehog? Or is it one of those
I think
kinda
it's
like,
another one of those that's like, yeah, fuzzy.
like the scorpion and the frog?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is, and so what happens is then these two animal types get mapped on to different kind of human things.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So, this one might get a lower grade. Of all the kind of moves that we make about animals, when we project ourselves onto other animals, then project those animal types as reflections of human types back onto ourselves, I find those arguments less convincing.
Mhm.
So I'm going to give that one a C.
I was in your office the first time you heard Jordan Peterson's thing about the lobster, and you almost had an aneurysm for the same reasons.
Oh my
You were
God.
so mad; it was hysterical to watch.
Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Not on the
Oh
show.
my goodness.
And the next is the fox and the grapes. The fox.
You
And the...
reminded me. Oh my gosh.
I've been waiting. The fox and the grapes is up next.
I love this one. So can I be? I mean, are we like running out of time? Because it's another long-winded explanation.
I think chat's here for it. I think
Okay.
we're officially. We've got, if it's soccer, we've got stoppage time.
Okay. Well, all right. Then I'll try to be quick.
You
but-
tell me your schedule. My bedroom's the next door over. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well.
And chat is
Right,
saying
I
go.
got
Chat is saying go.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that humans understand about the world is a higher order concept of weight. And this is something that specifically Danny says other animals do not experience. So the idea is that there is a concept, an abstract concept, that we tie to objects in the world, and we use that concept to predict how objects in the world are going to behave. So you all have picked up a cell phone before, and you've picked up a pen like this before, plastic and clicky, and you've picked up, I've got a desktop computer here, you know, like a tower or whatever they call them
Yep.
these days, a Dell computer. You've picked that up before too. You know, like this is just silly, right? You know that the desktop computer is heavier than the phone, and the phone is heavier than the pen. And using what you know about that heaviness, there's things that you would predict in the world that other animals, as far as we can tell, wouldn't predict.
Mm.
So you would predict that if you were laying on the ground and I was going to drop one of those three objects from the ceiling and drop it on you. Now, let's not account for the sharpness of the pin for just a second. Let's just think about weight. You would
Okay.
rather get hit by the pin. It's going to land on your face. You're not picking the desktop computer.
Yes.
You would say if you had to turn around, let's not pay attention to the difference in the sounds of the different materials. Let's imagine they're all made of the same material. Which one of these is going to make the loudest noise? It's going to be the heavy desktop computer. This is going to make the least loud noise. If this building's on fire and I need to bust through that window, I'm going to use the desktop computer and not the little pin to bust through the window. So not only would you all predict those things, that's like human stuff, right? Also, you predict them because of this idea of weight. And he calls it function weight, and it's kind of like a folk or naive theory of the way weight behaves in the world. And by the way, this is another thing that humans seem to develop somewhere between the ages of like 3 and 6.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'll just give you one example of that. So there's a whole set of complex experiments you can run on chimpanzees. And chimpanzees are super smart. And chimpanzees clearly experience the weight of the world. They're climbing on trees. They're throwing their own poo. They're throwing other chimps' poo. They're so strong. Chimps can like hang from a limb by 1 or 2 fingers for like 20 minutes at a time. And these are 185-pound chunks of muscle who can just hang there. I mean, that's how strong they are. Chimps love apples because they love sugar. And so chimps know if you come at them with an apple, these are chimps, you know, in a research facility, that you're going to hand them the apple. And they want it because they know it tastes good. You can take an apple, and let's imagine that my 2 hands are now towels. And that there's a chimp on another side of, we're looking down on the experimental setting. There's a chimp right here, and there's 2 towels. And the chimp can reach through and grab these towels. And so if I take an apple and I set an apple on this towel, just like this, and then on this side I take an apple and set it behind the towel, or beside the towel, like this, the chimp will walk in and almost every single time pull this towel, and they'll get the apple. You can take the same experimental setup, put an apple on top of this towel, take an apple and touch it to the side of this towel, but not resting on top of it, and the chimps will come into the experimental setting and pull basically a chance. It is as though they have no clue of the fact that the weight of the apple is going to hold it on to the towel, and that's what's going to bring the apple to me. They have some kind of understanding of the apple touching the towel being important, but not this higher order concept of weight. So not only does the narrative of the fox and the grape deal in already anthropomorphized animals, and not only does the fox flatter the crow to get the crow to drop the grapes. So if you all don't remember the story, this is the one where the fox is like, wow, you're a beautiful bird. If your voice is even close to as pretty as you are, then you must have the most beautiful singing voice in the kingdom. And then the crow sings and the grapes fall and the fox gets the grapes. So the idea is that the fox has flattered the crow, but really what the fox has done has used its own theory of mind, believing that the crow has a lack of an understanding of the higher order concepts of weight, and that's why it's going to be silly and drop the grapes.
Wow.
So I give it an S.
Yeah. Is this the top? Is this behind Tortoise in the Hair or what?
Let's put that one up top.
There we go. There we go.
Ooh.
I think we accidentally had that on here twice. I think we had Fox and the Grape and Fox and the Crow. I think, but I think move that to the end. I think you've done it for the whole fox and canon at this point. Let's move on to
Oh, I did just report on the Fox and the Crow, didn't
Yeah.
I? Yeah. Put the Fox
Yeah.
and the Crow up there.
Fox and the Crow, Fox and
Thank
the like
you.
sour grapes, the sour grapes, Fox and the Grape though. Where you want that?
Yeah. Is this the one where he can't get the grapes?
I
Yeah,
can't get the grapes. Yeah,
Yeah. And then he said, as if I'd want those anyway.
exactly.
that's the one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sour grapes. Well, that one's a good A.
That's a strong
And
A. A strong A, but the Fox and the Crow about flattery and all of that.
Yeah.
And
The Fox and the Crow.
yeah,
Sometimes it's fruit, but I think also sometimes it's like a piece of cheese.
it's a piece
that
of
the crow
cheese.
chops.
That's how I know it. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Okay, so Fox canon. We'll get there. We've
As if I
done it
wanted
here.
those grapes anyway.
As if I wanted
Yeah.
this. As if I wanted that in us here anyway. The next one
Yes.
is the ant and the grass, the ants and the grasshopper.
Right, and so this is like the industrious
That's right.
species against the non-industrious species.
That's
Well,
right.
there's a long line of like
It's life.
thinking through political theory and economics by thinking about animals, and I kind of put that on the same level as the hedgehog and the fox. But this one's slightly more respected.
Okay,
so
okay.
I'm gonna give it a B.
Like a B minus,
Yeah.
like the bottom of
Yeah,
B
I'm gonna
here?
give it like a B
Okay.
minus. Yeah. I'm gonna give it a
Next
B
up,
minus.
Town Mouse, Country Mouse. Town Mouse, City Mouse.
Country Mouse.
Town Mouse,
Yeah,
City
Town
Mouse.
City Mouse. Okay, so do we have a higher order understanding of place, and or can we be happy of where we come from?
Do
And,
we, chat?
Mm, Daisy says yes.
He says yes. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like that one maps pretty well.
Mhm.
So I want to put it up there with like the Fox and the Grapes.
Right behind the Fox and the Grapes, or right above?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time coming up with a strong reason.
Yeah.
But if I think about it more, it may come to me.
I think you're crushing it. We
Yeah,
got two
that's
left.
great.
We got two left for you, and they're two big ones. Next one is the wolf in sheep's clothing.
Mm.
Yeah, the wolf in sheep's clothing. That's I don't think about that one too much. Um,
That side.
what would be related to it? I guess I think of other, like we have sayings like the snake in the grass.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
clearly related to the saying
Yeah.
of the snake in the grass. And that which gets us is that which is already right here among us.
Mm-hmm.
That which gets us is that we perceive as just ourself, so it's safe. I don't know. That kind of touches on a lot of the things that we were talking about.
It does.
I'm gonna have to put it in the A category. Notice, like
Nice.
my standard, if I don't really know why I don't like you or why I really, really like you, I just give you an A if you're a fable.
Nice.
Is this where is this in the A compared to the other ones?
Right. Okay. Man, that one feels. You know what? I think it's second.
Second, right in the middle.
Middle-
Yeah, I think
middle
it's
A.
before Town Mouse and City Mouse.
All right, last
Yeah.
one. You knew it was coming. It's the crow in the picture.
Oh man, the crow in the picture. It's the only fable I know of that has launched an entire experimental paradigm.
Right?
Because of this fable, humans actually set up a situation where they could test whether or not raccoons could actually pull off the events of the fable.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like, if you're good enough to trick the scientists into actually doing science on you, even though any member of any folk group who tells these stories is going to know that it ain't really about the science, then that gets a pretty high grade. So I can't put it as high as the Fox and the Crow. I don't think. I think it's. Oh man, I'm really gonna put that over the tortoise and the hare? I am, just because.
Hey,
I'm gonna
look
put
at
it second.
Brandon, look at this
I'm gonna put it
beautiful distribution. This
Oh my
looks
God,
like
Yeah,
this
look
is
at that.
perfect.
it's perfect.
It's beautiful.
This is why we try to
It's
do odd
magical.
numbers on our tier list, so we can get that these beautiful distribution. All right, and nothing in D, but still some B's and C's. So I respect it.
Yes.
You've obviously thought a lot about it, but you're not like blindly just saying put them all S. Everyone,
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, everyone in chat here is Brandon's official Aesop's Best Animal Fables tier list. This is where I try to sum up what we've learned today, and I will say, on a scale from the Fox and the Crow to the Fox and the Hedgehog, Um, how responsibly are we anthropomorphizing animals?
Yeah.
There we go. Everyone, we've reached the end of our interview with Brandon. And Brandon, this is where I normally say, where can people find you if they want to see more? But famously, you are like very hard to find on the internet. So I will ask Brandon, what book should they read if they want to read more?
More about what?
Anything you've mentioned in this interview.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. The Aesop's Fable paradigm book, and especially because there are parts of it that is just kind of two people from different disciplines trying to be collegial, thinking about the same set of problems that some of you might find interesting. Those are parts that Danny and I did. But what's the real jewel in that book are there's these Laura and Grace, the two developmental psychologists who wrote for a folklore audience. It's really neat. And they were just finishing up their PhD as they wrote that. So this is young, really smart intellectuals, now brand new professionals. And so you can kind of see what somebody on that liminal space in the sciences is doing. It's really neat. And then there's an article from Greg Shrimp and an article from Bill Hansen.
And what's this called? This work?
This is the Aesop's Fable paradigm, an unlikely intersection of folklore and science.
Jared, can you drop that in chat? That'll be in chat in just a second, everyone. Jared's gonna get a link to that and drop it in chat, so you can follow up with more of Brandon's work and especially Aesop's Fable fandom appreciation, whatever we call it. But there's one last thing we do around here before the guest signs off. There it is. Thank you, Jared. Before the guest signs off, and everyone, you've already started doing it. I can tell because you're having a great time. But ladders in the chat for Brandon. Brandon, ladders are basically how the chat applauds for you. They will put the emoji for ladders in the chat. So everyone, ladders in chat for Brandon. I could climb that. That is a serious amount of ladders. Thank you very much for a wonderful episode and a wonderful interview.
Yes, thank you, Brandon.
And thanks. Like I said, we've already had. We had Moira Marsh on the show. We had you on the show. I need to get John K on the show, and it's all of my bosses from grad school.
That's great.
And Michael Dillon Foster was on the show. How could I forget Michael?
Yes.
Yeah.
This was a great season 2 finale.
Season 2 finale. Yeah, Brandon, I hope you'll watch our awards show next week. But yes, this is the last episode of our second year of streaming, and I'm glad we could move confidently into a third year of streaming with a great interview from you, Brandon. So thank you very much again for coming on.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks, y'all.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.